Wednesday, Thursday, November the 28th. Sorry about no fishing reports the last few weeks. I've actually been in Mexico fishing. That's what a fishing guide does when he gets time off. He goes and hires a guide and goes fishing. But, you know, I've been out a couple times in the past week, and I think it's, I found it to be a little tough other than the deep bite. That seems to be the most consistent thing, and the fish I've found are extremely deep. It seems like, this time of year, it's always a shad deal. So normally if you find the shad, you're gonna find the fish. And the water temperature is was about 52, 53 degrees, and the lake level's about 9, 11 and a half. But with that water temperature, I've spent a lot of time fishing shallow with like a wiggle wart and a rock crawler, and even mixing it up with a jerkbait. Normally, when we get down to that water temperature, that's perfect for the shallow bite. But I'm catching very few fish on a fast-moving bait up shallow. I'm not seeing hardly any bait up there. And even when I've had good conditions, early in the morning, when I've had a good breeze on places that I normally get bit on a crankbait or a spinnerbait, it doesn't seem to be happening. Now I can get on them same banks with a slow-moving bait and catch a few fish, and I'll get back to that. But like I said, most of the deep fish, before I went on vacation, I was finding a lot of bait fish in the center of the creeks. And normally, once they get back there in the wintertime, they'll stay there for quite a while. Well, they may go back there, but this past weekend, I found the majority of the shad to be moved out of the creeks, and they seem to be on the gravel flats. And I don't think we caught a fish shallower than probably 40, 42 feet. A lot of the fish, we finally started catching them when we found them, were out there somewhere above the shad, somewhere below the shad, but they were, a lot of them 50, 55 feet deep that we were catching them. And like I say, before I went on vacation, a lot of the bait was in the creeks. They've seemed to move out. I'm also catching some over some deep timber. And the baits that have been working the best for me out there is the ice fishing jig. It's a Rapala ice fishing jig. And this one here is a 7/8 ounce. And they also make a 5/8 ounce. But normally when I'm fishing that deep, I like the 7/8 ounce. It gets down there a little quicker. And I'll throw it on 12 or 15 pound line. That way if I get stuck in the trees, I can retreat, usually get the bait back. Another thing is a 3/4 ounce or 1 ounce white spoon. I don't think it matters what brand of spoon you use. And I don't even know if the white's that big a deal, because when it's down there that deep, there's only a few colors that the fish can, distinguish down there that deep, because you don't get any light from the sun and stuff down there that deep. But those two baits and a drop shot seem to be what we're catching them on. And I wasn't catching any more on a spoon or an ice jig or the drop shot. It seemed like it was all about the same, same numbers of fish. It was just, took a little while longer to get the drop shot down there. And on the drop shot, a lot of times in the wintertime, when the fish are really on shad, I like to use a little shad bait, but we also caught some on a little purple hand-poured worm. And like I say, it was about even whether it was on the spoon or the ice fishing jig or the drop shot. But the shad that were out there on these flats, there's just millions of them. And we actually had to find some shad that was over a little bit of structure, because you could just fish and fish and fish these big areas. There was so much bait out there. You had to find a little change in the bottom, or a brush pile that you're over the top of, or a tree seemed to be, where the fish were. And once you got one bite, you got, several bites in an area. And most of the fish were pretty good fish. I mean, a lot of keepers. It's not like we caught a lot of short fish. And then we started messing around. We fished some boat docks. But what I did get bit on shallow in the areas that I felt like I should have got a crankbait bite, caught a few fish on a Ned rig. And a lot of these fish were smallmouth. It seems like there's a lot of smallmouth and a few largemouth up shallow. Everything we caught out deep was pretty much Kentuckies with a few largemouth mixed in. But I was catching them on a little 3/16 ounce Ned rig, just watermelon red little Ned worm, and then it's 5 fish lures on new Ned rig head. And also I was catching some on a jig, setting the boat in about 18 to 20 foot. Most of the fish were probably 8 to 15 foot deep. It didn't really seem to matter. I'm not getting enough bites to where I could tell you a certain color that was working better than the other. I was throwing a straight brown with a Strike King baby rage craw, and I was throwing a brown and purple with a Zoom speed craw for a trailer. And like I say, I can't say if one worked any better than the other because the bites were pretty few and far between on the jig. I actually got more bites on the Ned rig. But there are some fish up there shallow. But like I say, I couldn't get them to bite a reaction bait as far as a spinnerbait or crankbait, even when I had good wind. You know, sometimes there just seems like there hasn't been a big move of the fish from the deep to the shallow like there normally is. Normally, around Thanksgiving up till Christmas, till that water gets down in the 40s, there's a good shallow bite. You know, we still got 2 or 3 weeks. It may happen, but, you know, it may not. A lot of them fish seem like they've gone really deep. They may not migrate back in there shallow. It all depends on the bait. If you start seeing the big gizzard shad or the threadfin up there shallow, I think there'll be some fish up there. But right now, most of the bait that I'm seeing is way out there deep. And the bites that I am getting in that 10 to 15 foot, they're few and far between. So, looks like the weather's going to be, you know, pretty good. Looks like it was really cold while I was gone. That didn't hurt my feelings at all. You guys had snow, and I was fishing in 85-degree weather. But it looks like the next week or so is going to be bearable to fish. It's usually one of my favorite times to fish. You know, when the water's real cold, you get a nice day where it gets up to 40, 50 degrees. Like I said, normally there's a good crankbait and spinnerbait bite. I've yet to find it, but I'm going to keep looking. So, oh, another thing I got to mention. A couple weeks ago, I was talking about a spinnerbait that I bought up at Lake of the Ozarks, and I caught some fish on it here. Worked really well. It was a 1-ounce spinnerbait, and I didn't know the name of the bait. It was just one I picked up at Fitz's Tackle Store at Lake of the Ozarks. But the guy sent me a business card and a few more baits, and it's called E-Factor Lures. Guy really makes a good, top-quality spinnerbait, and I think he'll make him just about any configuration you want as far as blades and skirt and head size. So if you want a real good spinnerbait, you might go online and check these guys out. It's efactorlures.com. So check these guys out if you're in the market for a good spinnerbait. So until next week, good luck, good fishing.